Just in case you don't know me, my name is Len Thompson, and I'm Broadcom's Mainframe Division Community Manager. And again, I want to welcome you to today's session. Before I hand you off to Dale and Dick, just want to let you know that we are recording today's session, which is why your lines are all currently muted. If you have questions along the way, please use the questions box along the right side of your screen, and we'll get through as many of those as we can during our time together today. And depending on how much time we have at the end, I can also let you know how to have your line unmuted if you'd prefer to ask your questions that way. The recording of today's session will be posted out in the CA Datacom community either later today or later this week, depending on when GoToWebinar decides to finish processing it. And the last thing from me is that we are always trying to make sure that these sessions are valuable. With that in mind, a short survey is going to pop up at the end of the session. I'd really appreciate you taking a few minutes just to give me and our presenters today a little bit of feedback, just so we can make the next session even better. And with that out of the way, I'm going to hand you off to Dale, who's going to introduce Dick this morning. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dale Russell. I'm the product owner for Datacom, and I'm happy to introduce Dick Williamson today in this session. Most of you have worked with Dick over the years on SQL support cases that have come to level 2 support, so you're familiar with him. He's been the lead developer for SQL for many years, and for 35 plus years been with the Datacom product family. So you may or may not know that he has really a deep desire to help improve query performance and query optimization for SQL, and to help you diagnose problems and improve your queries. So let's hear from you, Dick, about the SQL Monitor.
Hey, good morning. Well, let's get started here with the normal disclaimer. Today we're going to talk about a little background on the SQL Monitor, just exactly what it is, a little bit of its history, a brief demo of the latest version, and then get into sort of the real reason for the webcast this morning, and that is, how would I install the SQL Monitor and use it? Because we know that there are some roadblocks doing that, and we want to put our heads together this morning and figure out how to work around those and get everybody using this fantastic tool. And we have at the end some upcoming events to talk about. All right, way back in 2004, the SQL Monitor began by showing what was currently running. It was like, oh my gosh, it's Monday morning, they introduced a new app, everything is running slow. What's going on with these queries? I need information, right? So we'll briefly look at that, where you can see information about what's currently running at the transaction or logical unit of work level, and you can cancel it with the click of a button. You can get information at the detail level about the queries that are running to monitor its progress. You can see, which tables are reading most rows. Is it getting close to finished, or is it like, oh, this ain't going to run a long time? We can cancel it. And before you cancel it, you can click and get the SQL optimization report. So you can send that to us, and we can work on find out what's going on, make it better. Well, way back then, there were no corporate UI standards. And so it was really going to be hard to make an official part of the product, check all the boxes off and stuff like that. So it was a user contributed program. Now it's all based on using dynamic system tables. So you as a customer could have done the same thing. They're all freely available. There's nothing sort of secret going on behind the back here. But because it was not an official part of the product, you've been asked to sign a legal document acknowledging that. And we're going to talk about that possibly being a roadblock. How is it written? Well, it's written in the most common language for websites, PHP. It's been tested under Microsoft IIS or Apache, the two big web servers in the world. And it, of course, uses JavaScript on the client side to make it interactive, and it's going through ODBC, a request through data server. After the currently activity screen, a few years later, we added a COM status with an automatic refresh every 10 seconds. Then came version 2 with release 15.0. where we developed the source cache. Now this is really great because now you can get a history of what's running versus what's just currently running. You can see what happened in the past for these queries that are in the cache. You will see in a second in the demo, there's a summary level, and you can sort by many different criteria and find the queries that are using the most resources, running the longest time, etc. Or you can select a particular query that you have already identified as a problem. And then you can drill down and find detailed information about it. Now, a few months ago, we added version 3 because we had added table expressions, nested table expressions and table expressions. And that makes things a little bit more complex, you know, may have a few subqueries and everything. And we were not showing except the base table activity. And so it may be a lot of temporary table activity, and just it was unclear as to what the whole structure of the statement was without showing all the various steps. And that is now included with the resources that they're using. And then also we added one more number, the number of predicates or rows, or the filter factor of predicates that couldn't be sent to CBS, so you can identify that. And we made it more secure by removing username and passwords from the URL in case you were ever wanting to access this, you know, outside your firewall. Well, what could the SQL Monitor turn into in the future? Lots of good stuff could happen. One of the most important things probably is not to just show queries that are in the source cache, which are those that come in through server or the DB SQL PR utility, but all activity, dynamic SQL, static SQL, and COBOL programs, etc. That way, you've got one place to get a history of all of your SQL. Now, that's great for tuning, and this has been a great tool, but in the future, well, for many years, we've been working on increasing the functionality of SQL, adding nested query expressions and so forth. So now it's time to look more at the optimizer. And one of the things we want to look at is data value distribution, or DVD. It's like, is this an attribute that's optional and it's almost always null or spaces? Are we looking for pink cars or white cars? You know, it makes a big difference in estimating the cost. And right now we're not doing that great a job because we don't have that profile information, but we're going to. That's the good side. The bad side is we're gonna, you know, be changing the optimizer. And anytime you change the optimizer, even if it's almost all good, there's that little sliver of queries that happen to run slower. And having a great tool like the SQL Monitor to quickly identify those and fix those problems is making the Monitor an even more essential tool for you in the future. Next item, I don't know how many of you heard about the term simplified maintenance, but in the SQL group, every time we turn out an APAR, it seems like there's always a common module with some other APAR. And now it gets really complicated in which one you apply first, and can you have all of the fixes out there and so forth. And so we're going to try something, at least in the SQL group, that is to have a single APAR at a time. And then in order to make it very flexible so you can test just the APARs that you want, there will be switches. And you can say, I want to turn on these APARs and not those right now. And it would be great with the SQL Monitor to have that visibility of which ones are turned on, click a button, turn another one on or off, maybe have a pop-up window where you can type in some text, of have a history log of what your testing has been. We could do a lot of things with an app with regard to simplified maintenance. And so it just goes to show you that the SQL Monitor, although it began as an optimization tool, it's an app for Datacom and could do a lot of stuff. For example, we could send an email of the SQL optimization reports. I imagine Right now, you have to do some cutting, pasting or something, go through some kind of process, and it'd be nice to have an email just sent directly, wouldn't it? And all this information, the optimization report, the stat pages, that way we could get that information and help you resolve performance issues much faster. This last item is, like, to me, greatest thing since sliced bread, because a lot of times you've looked at a query and you say, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. We're using key A, we should be using key B. Now, how do I get that to happen? Got to go back to the applications group. They have to make the change in their program. They have to test it all. They've got, other priorities. It's like not easy, right? Well, what if you could do that yourself from this app? What if you just had a drop-down list of keys and you just click the one you want? That way, remember, in the source cache, we're using the plan from a previous execution. Well, if that previous plan that's stored there and going to be matched and used is the one that you tuned, then you don't have to go back to the group. You can change it instantly. That functionality is already in MUF. It just didn't make it into the UI yet. So that's some great stuff to look forward to. And then even farther in the future, this doesn't have to be used just for SQL. We could branch out to, DB utility. You wouldn't have to look up syntax. You just drop down menus, click, make your selections. So there's a whole lot of stuff that can happen with an app. That's the bottom line. Okay, I talked a little bit about the need for it even more than it's been in the past with regard to performance enhancements and changing the optimizer. And so I won't go into this too much detail, except looking at some of the things we're thinking about. Maybe we need to measure the performance before this change and compare it with the previous version. That versioning is already built into the dynamic system tables. And then maybe we'd have an option to say, okay, well, in this case, it didn't work out. Let's revert to the previous one. Or maybe you just want to lock into the old one. And so there's some things we could do here, right? But it would be a little difficult to do if you're running batch utility jobs to accomplish it. So let's get some feedback from you. We'd like to know what you think about this in terms of how you could use this. What are the things that you're most concerned about? And this upcoming, probably multi-year push to primarily work on optimization and what issues that might cause you and how we can make this a smooth ride. Lynn?
All right, so we're going to launch this poll, folks. We'll give you a few seconds to answer. All right, we'll give everyone a 10-second warning, so we'll do 10 more seconds. All right, thank you very much, folks. Go ahead, Dick.
Demo time. All right. We're going to look at using the monitor a couple of ways, because it seemed like, now maybe I'm dreaming, maybe nobody really has the time to actually sit down and look at the queries that are out there and be proactive and find ones that are inefficient and work on them. Maybe you're always just fighting fires. But just in case you want to look out there and find out what inefficient queries are, I'm going to show you how you can do that. And we're also going to look at what if you've identified the query. Maybe you're even an application developer using this tool and you're writing a new query and you want to, look at the performance of it. You'd like to look at that query, not everything that's, in the world running in MUF, right? So let's see how to do that. Let me see if I can get out of this, switch over. Yep. So here is the COM status page. And it's just like you would normally see with the com status. You can still, what's running, what the current request is and stuff. And it's set up right now to automatically refresh and take another snapshot every 10 seconds, or you can just click the refresh button anytime you want. Now here is the current activity. You get there by, pressing that menu bar. And please excuse this little thing over here. We're currently locked out of changing our web server right now, or transitioning. That normally won't be there. But you can see here, we have all the different steps for this query. And I ran one that sort of is doing a lot of Cartesian cross product stuff, so it would run a long time, and you can see from each one of the times that we're joining to the aggregate table, we got 48 rows, and then those were joined 11 times to get 6,000 rows, and all those were joined to the third table. Well, you can see this is going to run a long time and be very expensive, right? So you could just click the kill LUW and get rid of it, or get the optimization report and then click LUW. But remember, this is just for currently running activity. But it's got a lot of neat stuff here. You can tell, how many requests have been there, how long the transaction's been running, a few things like that. Pretty cool. But the real meat is actually tuning a particular query, right? Well, I lost one of my pages, so let me go back and do the source cache page. So let me just jump to the bottom, and then we'll get back to the top for a second. What we have here is all the queries that are in the cache. And right now, that's a number of queries that have executed through server DB-SQL PR since MUF was started. In the future, we'll have this so that this information is preserved across MUF executions. So what do we have here? Well, we have a query number. Now, I don't know if you've used this or not, but at the end of your select, you can have a clause that says query no space a number. That uniquely identifies the query. That's a great thing if you're not using it yet to start doing. That way you know exactly what query it is. You can go scan that in your source program and find it. Maybe assign ranges to different plans or programs or developers. So just by looking at the number, you know what it is. Great way to categorize your queries without having to actually search based on the source string. Version number is there later on when we optimize it to use a different key or different drawing order. You can compare the versions. We also have in the cache insert statements. So you can click on this heading to switch back and forth between the two types. This is just a straight, since MUF was started, how many times has it been executed? Or actually, you can go in with a SQL request and set the cache limit to 0 and then set it back on, and that'll flush the cache. And right here, you see the last time the cache was initialized. So these numbers can be reset that way. So after the number of times executed, there's the total milliseconds that it's executed, and then the average, how long does it run each time it's executed. CBS IO, if you didn't know, is sort of like resource units, okay? It's one for every physical IO, one for every 100 rows to account for more CPU time. So we have the total column, and every time it's executed, what's the average that it uses? And then this is an interesting column here. From this other, you can see what's been running the longest, what's been using the most resources, but maybe it's just a query that needs a lot of resources, right? We want to tune queries that we have an opportunity to make them better. Well, how do you make something better? You find the ones that have data scanning, and that would be based on the filter factor of the predicates. So a filter factor of 1 says everything's accepted, no rows rejected. Factor 0 says, nah, everything was rejected. And we have that based on index and data. So data reading is a lot slower, right? Index is much faster, so that way we broke it out. So you can see the difference. And then the last 3 columns is just to keep track of temporary table activity. Well, all these that start with 900,000, those are the queries that ran to actually run the SQL Monitor. We're going to have an option so you don't see those. So let's just look down here at the last 2. I have a couple of samples for 106 and then 206. But before we drill down, let me show you. We see that 106 used 3 milliseconds, 24 CBS IOs, and look at that filter factor on the data. Only about 1 in 20 rows are being accepted. You know the definition of an inefficient query? Queries that read, index, or data and then later have to throw them away. That was overhead and wasted effort. We'd love to have the query only go to the rows that we actually are going to use. And we noticed in 206, which is a variation of 106, where I tried to improve it, and it looked like I did. It only ran 1 millisecond, only used 3 CBS IOs, and look at that filter factor. It's almost up to 80% now. So let's see what happened. Let's look at that query. I could either click there or I've already done it. So here's the, and it's nice, you can have several query tabs open at the same time if you want. And then I'm going to go back and look at the heading in a second. What do we have here? Well, we've got the source of the query here. And let me just briefly describe what we're accomplishing here. We've got some sample tables, and they're in the database 1001, which you, I think, can install on your site. And we're going to get information about jobs, and what we'd really like to see is for a particular job type, job title, what is the average salary, what's the maximum salary, and who's making that maximum salary, okay? Well, we're first going to go to the job table and enter join that to, ooh, what is this? This is a nested table expression here, isn't it? Ever seen one of those? Right where you would normally put a table name, you can write a whole freaking query. Well, we're going to cast this salary amount because it's an average and it gives you a hell of a lot of decimal places we don't really need. So we're just going to restrict that to 2. Call that average salary. Max salary is just going to come right out of the position table. And we're joining there, of course, for a particular job ID, right? And we got to, group by that to get the average and the max. So now that we know what the average is, that max is, we still got to find out who has the max, right? So now we go back to the position table again with a different correlation name. And we're looking, of course, for the same job. And now we want to find the row where we have the max salary. And once we have that, we can join to the employee table to get the employee name based on the employee ID from that position table. And let's order the whole thing by job title so it comes out in sequence. So that's what we're doing here. Now, could you tell that from up here? This is all indented. The last step is to do the ordering, right? And we got to do these joins. We've got to go to the job table, and then we're doing some more. We got this nested table expression here, and we got a couple of base tables. The base tables are in the blue color. They naturally have keys that were used, and we have a description of the processes here, and then look at our stats. Sets is how many times that was executed. So, a nested loop join, for every outer table row, you have to probe the next inner table. So we have 25 rows accepted from the job table, and now we're going to probe the next tables. And some of these happen to have null values. That's why they don't stay at the full 25. Well, anyway, let's go to the accepted column. That's pretty obvious. Scanned is the total rows that we looked at. And if it had been only index scanning, it'll say that out to the side. And now, remember I said the definition of inefficient queries are those that do rejections? We got that by index, data, and the predicates that couldn't be passed to CBS that SQL had to do. And so you can just tell real quickly, looking at this table, whoa, everything's pretty low except this position table that we're reading. Look at that. Why is that happening? I mean, it looks like it's scanning the whole table 21 times, doesn't it? Well, let's look. Let's get the SQL optimization report. Look at that position table. We have the source here listed, and we got key definitions, and we've got the position table here, and we see we have a key on employee ID, and we have one on job ID. But I tell you a secret, when I ran this query, that job key wasn't there. And remember, if you look at the source, that's how we're joining it, by the job key and the salary. So that's why, yeah, it was having to search the entire table. And by adding the job key, that's how it got to running faster. Because here, next time around, we don't have any big numbers now, because we're actually using the job key. Now, we do have some, because I didn't add a key that's job and salary, but I thought, well, you know, this is pretty good the way it is, and how often is that key going to be used for salary? You know, it's a gray area, it's a judgment call for you. But I hope you can tell here, just by using this information, how you can tell what a query is doing that makes it inefficient, change it up, try it again, and see how it is until you get it running efficiently. Now let's look at the top. This information here is for the whole query, whereas each one of these is a processing step. Well, you see on the left, resource units, CBSIO, and elapsed time in milliseconds on the right. And we have the last time that it was executed. We have the time that it hit its max time or usage and its lowest usage. And the last line is the total. We only executed it once, so it's the same. But look up here at the top, the limit. Yeah, you can actually click on here and say, I want this thing to only use 10 IOs, click change, and yeah, next time somebody runs this, if it uses more than 10 CBS IOs, it's going to get the axe right then. It's minus 137 SQL code, you know, CBS IO limit exceeded. And you can do the same thing for runtime. And whichever hits first will take effect. And that's at the query level for this one query. And I know I can't hear your applause, but I'm hearing it in my mind. Well, we got the optimization report before. If this thing is running, it keeps running, you can just hit refresh, get a new look at this at any time. Now let me go back up to one thing I didn't cover. And this stuff at the top, we know about the menus. You can tell, you know, what release it is. You can set your data source over here. Maybe in the future we'll have it so you can pick from a list of all your buffs. But right now you have to set up a data source for each one and actually enter it. Over here in the cache overview, you can see it has 15 queries and the maximum is set at 100, so we're using 15% of that limit. We've set a 100 meg limit, I think, by default. We're using about a quarter meg, only about 2% memory-wise. We've had 534 matches out of 555 searches, so wow, that's a good hit ratio. And we terminated 2 queries. We set those limits and show you how many times those limits were hit. And this is the last time that either MUF was started or we set the limit to 0 and then turned it back on. Now that just leaves up here where you can do a selection. We could have looked just for query 106, right? Yeah, didn't have a lot of clutter. I mean, in a real world, you might have thousands of queries out there. And if you have a lot of them, but one thing I didn't show you, which I need to do, get the list back, is you can click up here and sort on any one of these columns and sort again to go descending and so forth. But even though you can do that, still, you know, maybe you'd like to limit this to showing only so many rows, and so you can put a row limit in there. Or maybe you've already identified which database, which table it is, and you can restrict it just by database to look at that database or database and table. And then I'll show you only queries that use that database or database table combination. And that concludes the demo, which actually worked. All right. And let's get back to our slideshow. Pretty great tool, but it's not installed, and we need to look at why, because we know most of you don't have this installed and being used. Well, there is the disclaimer that right away can be a roadblock, because like maybe you don't have the authority, you got to find somebody that's high enough that could get it all signed, get the paperwork all done. It'd be a lot easier if you didn't have to go through all of that. And we are working on ways that you can avoid that. And there will be a disclaimer still. It'll just be embedded in the software, and we will be doing away with the need to actually sign that document. But say you got that signed already, but you guys, you know, you're DBAs, you're not people who know how to install web servers, right? And you got to have a web server, right? This is a GUI, you know, web application. Well, it's actually pretty easy if you know how to do it, but if you don't, maybe that's your showstopper. So we'd like to know how we can get around that. Would you still be able to do it if we made like a YouTube how-to video and walked you through all the steps? Do you have security concerns about having a web server? Maybe you know how to do it, there's no security concerns, but it's like, all I got's a thin client. Or maybe I got a PC, but I don't have administrative rights. I don't know how to, I can't activate IIS, which is there with Windows, but yeah, you got to be able to turn it on. And now I could ask somebody in my company. I mean, we got a website. You know, there's people in my company that do websites. I don't know who it is, and I don't know who would help me, and I don't know how to get it done. So let us know, what are your showstoppers? Or maybe you don't care. Maybe you don't have some SQL performance concerns. Is that true? Or maybe I only have access to web mainframe applications on ISPF, you know, like SysView. And yeah, SysView, the old 3270 screens, they're not as pretty and as nice as browser screen, but I do have access to it. You know, maybe that's the answer. Well, let's take a little poll and ask for some input here. Is your problem, I don't have a web server to run? Yeah, was a disclaimer a problem? If I had a web server, what about security? I mean, we always thought of this as something you'd always be behind your firewall, but maybe you're going to also let your application developers use it. You know, maybe they're working from home. Or maybe I can't get to a browser from my terminal. Or what is it that's stopping you from using the monitor? Let's find out, Glenn.
All right, folks, just like before, we'll put this poll out for a few seconds to give everyone a chance to give us some feedback. And just a reminder, if you do choose other, that there is an opportunity in the post-event survey where you can fill in, you can give us that information.
And this is, you can check more than one, right?
Yes. All right, 10-second warning, folks. Three, two, one. All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Okay. Well, I hope you've found some value in the monitor just the way it is today. But it's not perfect, right? So tell us how we can make it even better. I know we've had some comments about that optimization report. It's got a lot of background information, which is mostly useful to us in support and digging down and really finding out what's going on in a query. Highly suggest you scan for that summary at the bottom that shows you, well, basically what's already in the monitor. But if you're doing it by batch, that's how you find what's doing. But it's like, you still got to, do some analysis, figure it out. And it's not simple. Maybe the reason you haven't pushed for getting this installed more than you have is, yeah, it's nice information, but it's all pretty complicated. I need something easier. Let us know. Yeah, if somebody comes to me and says this is really running slow, I can fight that fire. But what I'd really like to know is when we have problems, I need to know right away to head off these critical issues that arise. Let me set alerts. Give me some thresholds. It was running too long. Tell me, send me an email. Is that what you want? Is that what would be better? And of course, I'm pretty sure everybody would want to see all the queries, right? Because right now, dynamic and embedded static queries are not being shown. And then would it be helpful if you recorded notes at the query level? You did some tuning on this on so-and-so date, so-and-so came to me and said it's running too slow. It was running an average response time of 30 seconds. Later on, we got it down to 15 seconds. People still complaining. You can make a little log and just pull it up right away. Because you're going to have a lot of queries you're tuning, right? And it might be nice to have something like that to keep it all straight. Let us know. You need the information to be easier to use. You need to be able to set the key order and method to use. And I'm going to dive more in detail on that next. Do you need email alerts? What would make the monitor easier for you to use? Lynn?
All right, guys, here's the last poll for today's session.
And of course, you can always drop me an email. I am all ears on this topic anytime you have an idea.
All right, 10-second warning, everybody. Three, two, one. All right, thanks very much for your input.
All right. Remember, this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. What are optimization overrides? Well, there's a couple of things you can do to override what the optimizer chose. And that's to set what key to use and the join order and method. And the other thing you do to tune queries usually is, of course, add a new index. Now, if you can do those three things, you can probably optimize just about every query. Sometimes you got to change the syntax, but these are the big things. And immediately you say, if I got to change the order to specify what key, maybe I can't even do it, or maybe I could do some different syntax or something, but a lot of times it involves going back and changing the query in the user's application, and that's not easy, is it? So what if you could do it? Just on your own, just do it. It's in the physical level of the three schema architecture. It can't change the logical result, except it could give you the rows back in a different sequence if they didn't use a group by or order by. But those are the rules with SQL. But I think maybe we could give you the option, or at least alert you if that would happen. And it would be nice to show a different version so you could compare and see if you got it better, hopefully, or maybe worse, you could tell. So how would this work? Well, it isn't built yet, so we got some things we could design, but basically, I would have issued, and when we were looking at that detail report, and you could saw each of the keys there for the base tables. You could just click on one, and it'd be a drop-down list, and you would select a different key to use. On the join order, not sure how that would work yet. Maybe a little plus sign over on the left of those rows, and you know, drag and drop them and rearrange their order. Keep in mind, if you use inner or left join syntax, the order is already fixed. So that's only when you use commas in the from clause. But we could also have a drop-down list where you could select whether you want to use a merge join or not. Now, using merge join is restricted. You have to have an equijoin and a few other restrictions. But if it's possible, you could switch, or maybe it selected merge join, but the filter factors weren't estimated well, and it's actually better to use a nested loop, and you could control that. And if you didn't know, there's already a special register called Datacom Optimization, and you can actually change the join method with that today. But of course, it's a lot easier not having to go back to the query and just select it here in the application. And this would be a permanent change. We'd save it to a DIS file, even across month executions for here on. You'd never have to go back and change the application. Well, that's the presentation. I hope you found it helpful. Hopefully it's sparked some things to think about, and I would certainly welcome your emails and conversations. But going forward, we need to find a way that tools like this can be in your hands. It's not only been important today, that it's going to get more important as we start improving the optimizer. So hope to hear back from you. And now Dale is going to talk to you about some upcoming events.
Great, thank you very much, Dick. And I know that you've probably given some food for thought for people, and that you hopefully will be hearing from them, some emails and phone calls. But looking forward in the immediate term here, we do want you to know about the Cadre conference coming up. Cadre and IUA for IDMS are joining together this year. We're having our conference here in the Plano, Texas area. It's actually in the Addison Conference Center in Addison, which is another suburb of Dallas, just about 10 or 12 miles away. It's April 20th to 24th. We are looking forward to you coming. We have a day and a half of pre-conference education, followed by 2.5 days of full technical sessions. We'll have sessions for DBA SysProgs, and we'll also have sessions for application developers. We're going to have some keynotes from leadership within Broadcom, and you'll have plenty of chance to get together with either your developers, such as Dick here, product management, engineering people, people you have talked to and worked with over the years, but also get together with each other, people from other companies who are here. We're really excited about the conference, and we're looking forward to you coming. Registration has been open for a couple of weeks, and as of today, we have posted the preliminary agenda, the session list that we believe will be what you get. We may add another session or two, tweak one or two here between here and the conference, but we believe this agenda is pretty much it. So now is your time to review that agenda, and then go ahead, get your approval from your manager to attend, perhaps based on that agenda, and come register. So please go to community.broadcom.com to the community to get more information. If you do need additional information, you can either write our product manager, Sheila Miller. There's her email address, sheila.miller2@broadcom.com, or you could write me, dale.russell@broadcom.com. And next slide. It's not moving. There we go. Another event that you may want to take advantage of, if you can go to an additional, is the Mainframe Technical Exchanges. We have had a series of these. Last year there were 4. This next year there are 4. Last year, we did have a representation for Datacom at the Mainframe Technical Exchange here in the Plano area, and we will do that again next year. Next year, it'll be October 13th to 15th, but we will also, for customers perhaps who are in Europe, we will be participating in the Prague conference. So there'll be a number of products at these Mainframe Technical Exchanges, not just Datacom or Datacom and IDMS, as such as the Cadre IUA meeting that I just mentioned. These are meetings where you would hear about SysView and OpsMVS and CA7 and CA Disk and mainframe operational intelligence and many other mainframe products. But we just want you to know that in Prague and Plano next year, we will have a Datacom presence as well. If you can only come to one, we would appreciate it, and we think you would get the most benefit by coming to the Cadre IUA conference this April, because then it's solely focused on those products, and it is a half day, 3 days, and a half day instead of 2.5 days.
Do I hear any questions?
All right, folks, if you do have any questions, please do use the questions box right in the GoToWebinar control panel, or if you'd like to have your line unmuted, there's a way to raise your hand virtually in the GoToWebinar, and I can unmute your line. At this point, we don't have any questions, but we'll give you a minute or two to do some typing or to raise your hand so we can unmute your line. I always feel like I need to have a little background music here.
While you're typing questions, we do appreciate your feedback on these webinars. We've done several of them. We're planning to do more. If you have a topic you'd like to suggest for an upcoming webcast, please let me, Dale Russell, or Sheila Miller know what topics are on your mind that you might like us to talk about.
That's a great reminder, Dale. And there actually is a field in the post-webcast survey that asks that very question. So feel free to put it in there, and I'll make sure that the team sees it as well. All right, I don't see any questions coming in, so I guess we can probably go ahead and wrap up. So Dick and Dale, thank you very much as always. And to those of you who took time out of your day to join us for this session, we really appreciate it. And we hope to see you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.